Welcome. Please take your seats and silence your cell phones. Our program is about to begin. Welcome. Please take your seats and silence your cell phones. Our program is about to begin. Welcome. Please take your seats and silence your cell phones. Our program is about to begin.
Throughout Africa, locally led health organizations are working to make an impact in their home countries, but they often lack the funding to expand their reach and fully meet community needs. In 2022, African Visionary Fund, in partnership with the Wagner Foundation, launched a Clinton Global Initiative commitment to action to financially support African health organizations so they can increase resilience, scale their impact, and accelerate solutions in local communities. Since announcing this commitment, African Visionary Fund's portfolio of investments has expanded care to more than 228,000 people. That means more women have access to sexual and reproductive health services, more children with cancer receive dignified treatment, and more people in rural communities are connected to medical care. To improve health outcomes, we must invest in communities and localized solutions. African Visionary Fund is helping to lead the way. Thank you, and congratulations on this outstanding progress.
Please join in welcoming to the stage Jonathan Capehart.
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Capehart of the Washington Post, MSNBC, PBS NewsHour, and a whole lot of other jobs. Thank you all very much for being here for today's session, Shifting the Power, How New Philanthropic Approaches Can Transform the World of Social Impact. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by a series of philanthropic leaders working in countries around the world. I think there's one in particular you're looking forward to hearing from. I can't imagine who that might be. Some focus on different issues and some take different approaches, but they have a shared commitment to use their resources to empower communities. We'll have a series of conversations today drilling down on what drives these grant makers' funding, how they are innovating, and what lessons we can learn to make philanthropy as effective, inclusive, and equitable as possible. And so we will kick things off with our lead conversation. Vedika Bhandakar and Matt Damon. Thank you both very much for being here. This is a question for both of you, so you can decide who's going to answer first. But last year...
I will always farm my answers out to Vedika. She's much smarter than I am.
I was going to say Matt always gets the first one.
Okay, you're still going to have to decide. Last year, Water.org made a CGI commitment to action to launch the Water and Climate Initiative, aiming to reach 100 million people living in poverty with safe water and sanitation solutions by February of this year. You've reached 3.4 million people through this effort, raised $20 million in commitments, and pooled corporate balance sheet investments of $140 million towards water and sanitation. Here's the question after all of that. How did this commitment represent a shift in your approach, and what have you learned from year one?
Okay. So first of all, thank you for rattling off all those numbers. I think you remember them much better than I did. For a long time, Jonathan, we had been working bottom up, so really working with households and making sure the households, people who live at the base of the economic pyramid, they have access to affordable finance so that they can build the solution which they want for water and sanitation. And that's been going really well. And we want to continue to scale that because, unfortunately, there's still millions and billions of people all across the world who do not have access. However, we realize that this bottom-up approach is not enough. And we really also need to come at it top-down to make sure that the infrastructure really extends to reach people who are currently either unserved or underserved. And that's the journey we've been on with the commitment that we made last year. We're really excited and happy to see that the same approach which we took of blending philanthropy and investment when we were going bottom up is the is as effective, if not more, when we're coming at it from the top down.
See, why am I even up here, Vedika? That was.
You have no thoughts to share on that. Well, you know what? Let me ask you this, Matt. I'm sure a lot of people in this room know about your work and your commitment to water.org. But could you, for folks who might not know, why is the issue of water and access to clean water and access to clean water for people living in places where they don't have it, why is it so important to you?
Well, it underpins every single, just about every single issue of extreme poverty. All these sustainable development goals, you can't solve for them unless you solve for water. You know, at the human level, it's about, you know, if you go out and meet people who do not have access, you're looking at very different outcomes for their lives. Girls, you know, the water collection usually falls to women and girls, and so that means women aren't working, girls aren't in school. You know, my eyes were open to this 20 years ago, the first time I went on a water collection with this wonderful kid, and she was telling me about what her life was going to be like, and she was going to be a nurse and move to Lusaka, the big city, you know, the capital city of Zambia, and it reminded me of Ben Affleck and I talking about we're going to move to the big city of New York and be actors, and I realized that none of that would have been possible had there not been a borehole near her home where she could go collect water. Were it not for that, she wouldn't be in school. She'd be spending her day wandering around trying to find water for her family. So it affects lives in kind of incalculable ways. I mean, there's the needless death that you deal with you know 400,000 kids dying a year of totally preventable disease. You know, diarrhea can be a death sentence in some places if you don't have access to, you know, clean water. And so it's not only that. It's just it's the stifling of human potential, and that's just totally unnecessary and totally solvable. And that's one thing I think we both would want to. If you leave with anything from this panel, please leave with this: the fact that this is entirely solvable. It's just about bringing the energy to bear on the problem. We know how to do it. We did it for ourselves here in the West 100 years ago. I mean, imagine if, you know, we cured cancer and in 100 years people were still dying in some parts of the world of something we'd solved a century ago. It's really unthinkable. So the solutions are right in front of us.
Vedika, you said something. You rounded off three things. You said lending, philanthropy, and then there was a third one that I cannot remember. But I want to focus in on the second one, and that's philanthropy. I just learned of a new phrase. It's new to me, but I'm certain not new to everyone else in this room, and that's trust-based philanthropy. And you focused on that in your transition. What does that mean to you, and how are you shifting your work to reflect this new way of working?
You can start. I'll jump in. We'll double dutch it.
Okay. So, yeah, Jonathan, you said it's a new phrase for you, and I think we've been very, very fortunate that it's not new for us. We've had partners, both corporate partners, individuals, and high net worth foundations who have placed their trust in us and have trusted us with philanthropic dollars to really build what we've been able to do. So our focus, and when we started off, we were a very conventional organization, and we would say, okay, we'll use the philanthropic dollars to dig wells. And very soon we realized that actually water crisis at its heart is a financing crisis. And so we said, that's what we're going to focus on, and we're going to really make sure that every dollar of philanthropy that we take, we're able to stretch it as much as we can. So to rattle off some more statistics, every dollar of philanthropy that we take today results in $16 of investment by our local financial partners all across the world, which means people are able to get access to safe water and sanitation much faster. And it's really, the way we think about it is philanthropy paves the way and is able to bring investment capital, which then helps scale the solutions much, much faster.
And we wouldn't be here as we are today, having reached 58 million people without trust-based philanthropy. It really was, it was required of our donors to believe in us Gary White, our partner, he innovated, he came up with this innovation of water credit, which was applying microfinance at the household level for water loans. And that was a real thought leap for the microfinance institutions, but Gary knew that it would work. And Bill Clinton actually was one of the first people who looked at the model, and I always do this because he said, he immediately recognized it was going to work, and he just said, "You got to run the numbers up, just run them up." And he was exactly right, and he also said that to Gary and to me in 2012, when we celebrated the first 1 million people that we'd reached, and now we're reaching 1 million people every 6 weeks. Yeah, thanks. We were laughing earlier about, because we have a lot of meetings with people in the finance world, and you always see these graphs, the hockey stick graphs. Like, this is an actual hockey stick graph.
Exactly.
It actually panned out. So we've really been kind of moving from strength to strength, but it required that thought leap at the beginning, and because we just ran these numbers, had we stayed with the conventional way of doing things and just doing direct impact, digging wells, and which a lot of donors wanted. I want to know where the well is. I want to be able to see it on them. I want to know how many people in that village got water because of my dollars, and we realized that just wasn't going to get us there. And to really maximize our impact, we had to pivot and attack it from this from a finance angle. And had we stayed with the conventional way of doing things, to reach the same 58 million people, it would have taken us 400 years. So this is a better way to do it.
What was it that President Clinton said to you again?
You got to run it up, run those numbers up.
So obviously this is happening during UNGA, United Nations General Assembly, and in the less than a minute that we have left, I mean, you have access to anybody you want to talk to get to them, to say what your priorities are. But if you had an opportunity to sit with one of the world leaders who's in town today, who would it be, and what would you ask them for?
Wow.
In 33 seconds. We actually have a little more time.
This is definitely a Vedika question. Well, I would point, whoever we sat with, I would point out all the companies that are coming in and who are investing on the asset manager side of water equity, and coming in for very big numbers to try to turbocharge this and get it going. And that combination, is really going to get us where we need to get eventually, which is, there's 5 seconds left, which is what our mission statement, which is that we can solve this in our lifetime. And we believe that, and we know it to be true.
Vedika?
I would sit with the President of the United States and say, when the world solves SDG 6, which is safe water and safely managed sanitation for all, we'll go a long way in solving all other SDGs.
And with that, we'll end this conversation. Matt Damon, Vedika Bhandakar, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Jonathan.
He does a great President Clinton imitation. That was terrific. Okay, as we get set up for the next discussion, I'm going to introduce our two. I'm trying to vamp so that they can move the chairs and move the tables. But let me call to the stage Tony Elumilu, chairman of the United Bank for Africa Group and founder the Tony Elumilu Foundation, and Dr. Carmen Rojas, president and CEO of the Marguerite Casey Foundation.
It's great to see you. That's a hard act to follow.
So let's start off with a question for both of you, and Dr. Rojas, you go first. The big bets, you committed $100 million over 10 years to support economic empowerment. What have you learned in the years since you launched this work about making these types of strategic big bets?
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be in this conversation with Tony today. Marguerite Casey Foundation, just as some background, is a racial and economic justice foundation based in the United States that funds communities across this country to shift the balance of power in society to those folks who've long been excluded from having it. And for us, we have a very specific commitment to making sure that government works for communities that have long been excluded from representation, from political power, from economic opportunity. It's wonderful to be coming up after this last panel where we hear so clearly the power of private markets. And we are the, I would say, like the countervailing weight, where we want the government of the United States of America to be equally serving all of our communities, to be serving poor communities, communities of color, immigrant communities, in ways that other communities have been able to benefit. In this last year, it's been a real gift to see what it looks like when you have a group of tenants, for example, in Kansas City, who we've been able to support to, one, pass the largest investment in social housing the city of Kansas City has ever seen. So $50 million to build low-income housing for mostly mothers in Kansas City. And then in the following year, this same group of moms got together and said, I don't feel like I see myself in my local government, and ran for office. And they ran 6 people for city council, 4 people won city council seats. And so for me, it's these strategic bets to make sure that we aren't solely relying on philanthropy, but that we're activating the power of our dollars, public dollars, to make people's lives better in this country.
Let me stick with you for one more question on this, because you sort of anticipated a question I was going to ask down the road. But in the foundation's work in its investing in equity, as economic equity, racial equity, social equity, power equity, why is this the focus of your approach? And then, because there are a lot of priorities here, equities to pursue, how do you prioritize what you do?
I'm going to do like the 101. It's clear to me that, we can't disconnect people's racial experiences from their economic experiences in the United States. These two things we've long known are so deeply intertwined. So I don't feel like there's a way that we can make a priority of one over the other. We know in terms of job access, housing access, access to capital, that people of color in this country are often left behind and excluded from the opportunities that their white counterparts have. And so we lead from that perspective. I think, as an institution, we've committed to this because we're clear that at the systemic level is where the greatest change can happen for people. So I often tell the story of my mom. My mom is one of 17 kids from Nicaragua, grew up in a small town, immigrated to the United States at a time when labor unions were at the peak of their power, when the feminist movement had started to make really serious gains for women in the workplace, where the civil rights movement had expanded political representation. And so she landed in a United States that made it possible for her, with a middle school education, to have a daughter like me that could go on to get a doctorate, be a Fulbright scholar, run a billion-dollar foundation, because it was at a moment in which people in this country and our elected officials were committed to a shared fate. And so I don't want to be the last generation of people in this country that benefit from that kind of opening and opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And I see you nodding in agreement, Mr. Elimilu. I would love for you to tell us about why Afrocapitalism is the motivating philosophy underlying your work. What is it? And why do you believe it's the key to transforming Africa socially and economically?
So it's embedded in my story. I was born in Africa, educated in Africa. I live in Africa, and I've make my earnings in Africa. And I've seen around me on the continent a group of young, talented, energetic, intelligent, ambitious people, young men and women who want to succeed, who want to contribute their own quota in transformation of Africa, but who lack capital, who lack training and mentoring, who lack networking opportunities. In my own story, I started as nobody. And through luck, being at the right place at the right time, maybe being as talented as these young Africans I just described. And I was at that intersection of luck, hard work, being prepared. And I've come to see firsthand also how success in entrepreneurship, success in business can help to address most of our needs, societal needs. So 13 years ago, my wife and I decided that we need to create the opportunity that we experience. We need to play our own role in helping to democratize luck, to play our own role in helping to empower a generation of entrepreneurs, our young ones, our young males and females in particular, and our women on the continent, who will help to develop and transform Africa. That is the underpinning of Afrocapitalism. That is the genesis of Afrocapitalism. A call on the private sector, African private sector, global private sector, governments, development agencies, for us to work together collaboratively in the 21st century to help develop Africa, to help create people who are self-reliant, people who are not going to be perpetually dependent on donor funding, to help people to be able to train their own children and not to depend on someone to train children for their children, to help people afford medical when they need it. That is Afrocapitalism, and that we believe will come through private sector investment in critical sectors that help to transform and create humanity.
So I really loved your, and I heard other people responding to the one phrase you said, that you and your wife wanted to play our role to democratize luck. I'm just wondering, is there anyone else like you and your wife? Are you out there basically alone trying to do this? Or are there other business leaders and entrepreneurs in Africa who are joining with you in the effort to democratize luck?
What started as a family-funded endeavor, the Tony Elmelu Foundation and the Entrepreneurship Program, today is bigger than that. We have partners. We have United Nations Development Program. We just announced our partnership with the IKEA Foundation, the second largest foundation in the world. We have a partnership with European Commission and co. So all of us, because we want to democratize luck and create opportunity for people, Africa has close to 1.3 billion people. Over 65% of these people are under the age of 30. This can be a demographic dividend. It can also be a cost for all of us. So realizing that poverty anywhere is a threat to all of us everywhere, we believe that it's not the amount of money we have in our bank balances that counts. That what counts is the impact that collectively we make in helping to make this world a better place. So we try to encourage other successful people to say, in 21st century, we can't keep waiting for people from outside to help develop Africa. We can't play our own role in developing Africa. Again, that is Afrocapitalism. They are listening. The pace can be faster or quicker, but people are listening. People are beginning to realize it is in our self-enlightened interest to create wealth and prosperity around us. Otherwise, the future will be bleak for all of us.
So, Dr. Rojas, I hear you've been responding as Mr. Elumilu has been speaking. I would love to get your thoughts and your reaction to what he said. And also, I heard in your first answer some of what he was saying in terms of democratizing luck.
That's right. Yeah, I think that this framing of democratizing luck, we just met in the green room, and the green dress green room, and I feel like we are connected in this desire to democratize, Tony to democratize luck, us to democratize power. We know that there are, just as in Africa, in the United States, a very small number of people who influence the life of the vast majority of people in this country. And we have a real commitment to democratize power. I think democratizing luck is such a wonderful ambition, and am excited for what being lucky enough to meet somebody like you, what being lucky enough to be able to start an enterprise, organize your community, run for office, to see yourself in the halls governing your community, with your community, allows for. And so I feel like the notion of democratizing luck is related for me to the ability to democratize power.
I'm going to ask you both the same last question that I asked Vedika and Matt, and that is, again, it's Unga Week in New York. Everybody's here from around the world. If you had an opportunity to meet a world leader and put an ask into him or her or them, who would it be, and what would the ask be? And Mr. Elumilu, I'm going to go to you first.
That is the toughest question. When you asked that question, I was hoping that you would not extend that question to us. I didn't even think. I don't know. I think that the person I would love to meet would be someone that helps to actualize the kind of aspirations I want to see for our young people. I want to see a leader that will help us have our women more economically empowered. I'd like to see a leader that prioritizes our young ones. I'd like to see a leader that helps to create jobs, or policies that will create jobs. I like a leader in this geopolitically tense environment we live in that will help calm society. Because we live every day in a manner that is a little bit scary. So we're looking for leaders that bring things together. So those are the kind of leaders. That is the kind of leader I want to see. So if you help me identify that leader, I will tell you who the leader is.
Double cross.
Right. All right, Dr. Rojas.
I would really, really love to meet, less for a question and more for a high five, a thumbs up, the President of the United States, Joe Biden. We are seeing the largest investment of public resources into communities across this country at this very moment in U.S. history. And it's making sure that rural communities have access to clean water and internet and good schools. It's making sure that people who work for construction companies that are building roads actually have care, can have childcare opportunities for their kids. Like, this moment in the United States is unprecedented historically. So I would love to meet Joe Biden, mostly for a high five.
Okay, let's see if we can work on that. Dr. Carmen Rojas, Tony Elumilu, thank you both very much for this conversation. I'm getting a lot of good lines from these conversations. As you've probably have seen throughout this meeting, members of the CGI community are asked to share information about their commitments to action. Please welcome to the stage Karine Jocelyn to tell us about the Haitian Women's Collective commitment.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here today. By the way, Matt Damon shook my hand. Just saying, ladies. Didn't know that was gonna happen. I'm Karine Jocelyn, and I'm from the Haitian Women's Collective. 9 years ago, I left New York and took a professional sabbatical to work in Haiti on sexual and reproductive health. It was an incredible learning experience, and after returning to New York, I created the Haitian Women's Collective. Currently, we have over 15 local women-led organizational partners throughout Haiti. We focus on grant making, emergency funding, and capacity building, access to important resources and networking, allowing for learning opportunities to increase their visibility. With almost $1 million committed from entities such as Madre, Fondation Chanel, and the New York Women's Foundation, our team is announcing a Clinton Global Initiative commitment to action to launch a fund for Haitian women. The fund will address issues of equity, gender, race, Black feminism, and trust, allowing us to implement a transformative shift in philanthropy. The fund will change the narrative, allowing for local community-led organizations to be funded equitably, as they are closer to the problem and solution. Funding will be multi-year, focused on organizational development and increasing sustainability. While we have our eyes on the prize of the fund, with increased instances of sexual assault and the need for reproductive health care, we have an ethical responsibility that can't wait until 2025 when we launch the fund. Over the next 3 years, we will develop and launch one of the first women's funds in the Caribbean, and we will provide sexual and reproductive health services to 1,500 women by partnering with local experts. We will evaluate this model that can be duplicated and allow us to establish SRH, sexual and reproductive health, as a priority area when we launch the fund. My short time at CGI has already shown me the power of partnership to scale this idea. Our commitment to action is about the power of bringing women together, shifting economic power to local organizations who understand the cultural context and are accountable to their communities and can bring innovative solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the announcement of that commitment, Ms. Jocelyn. I neglected to say the first conversation was strategic pivots. The second conversation that you just saw was a moment ago was strategic big bets. This one is funding with trust. And our two panelists will be Judith Lingemann, Director of International Affairs at Postcode Lottery Group, and Tsitsi Masiyiwa, Executive Chair and Co-founder of Higher Life. Please welcome them both to the stage. Hello. Don't forget the microphone. All right, so as I said before in the first conversation, this phrasing is new to me, trust-based philanthropy. So I would love for both of you to answer this question. What is it, and how does it work from your respective vantage points? You go first.
Thank you so much. It's a real wonderful opportunity for me to be sharing some of the things that I have seen, experienced in philanthropy, and in particular, trust-based. One of the organizations I work with is run by an amazing former nurse who, as she was doing her work in a hospital in Uganda, came across so many young teenage girls who were falling pregnant. And as a result of their unpreparedness to be ready to give birth, mentally, physically, noticed that they would be losing their children. She left her job and decided to go and start a small home where these young girls would find a place of refuge, where she would look after them, prepare them for childbirth, and then thereafter take 3 months to teach them how to look after their babies, and as a result, reduce infant mortality rate, give them, the young girls, the basic skills to be able to nurse their child and find a way of living life after giving birth. Now, for me, that's what trust philanthropy is. How do you begin to ask a person like that to write a proposal? How do you ask them to give you their change theory of change presentation? How do you ask them to prove to you what the impact numbers look like? Trust-based philanthropy, for me, is based on going into the communities, experiencing face-to-face what these champions, heroes do, not for a tax incentive, not for an award, but who live their lives to impact lives, to change communities, to lead and be strong advocates by bringing practical and very hard, making hard, very difficult decisions to protect lives of people who have no capacity to say thank you or to pay them back. That's, for me, is what trust-based philanthropy is.
Okay, I'm done. That is so beautiful. Yudi, for you, trust-based philanthropy.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Well, allow me to elaborate a little bit about the organization that I represent today, because we are well known in some European countries, but maybe not that known here in the US. I represent the Postcode Lottery Group, and we operate community lotteries. And we have 14 million players in the countries where we operate our lotteries, who all play on a monthly basis, and it's a very safe lottery, and it generates a lot of funding, because up to 40% of the ticket price goes in a big pot, and it goes to all the charities. I don't know anything else than trust-based funding. That's really my thing, and we're both very passionate about it. Because our lottery from the start had the philosophy that we think we can operate a lottery, we know how to do that, we have a great team in 5 countries working on that, but the charities know best how to spend that money. And just to talk also a little bit about numbers, last year we raised almost $1 billion US, and we distribute among thousands of organizations, of which about 350 now are long-term partners, as we refer to them. So it's obviously the Clinton Foundation, but WWF or the Red Cross, UNICEF, Human Rights Watch, you name them. I'm not going to name all the 350, but how it works with us, that if we grow, we raise more funds thanks to our players. We have expert teams in all the countries, and you can apply for funding. And what we like best is to enter into a long-term partnership, usually about 5 years. Of course, we have a very thorough screening at the beginning, there are criteria, but once you're in, we really trust our organizations to whatever they think is best. So for the course of that first 5 years, there's not that much monitoring and reporting. And the funny thing is, and I've been working for the lotteries for 20 years already, we are informed very well by our partners. So we know about the positive impact that's being made. But we also learn and hear when things go differently than anticipated. And then with unrestricted funding, they can redirect and do things in a different way. So I have many examples of how that works, and that's the way we interpret trust space. We think they know exactly how to do their work, and we make sure that we enable them to have the highest amount of impact.
We'll give one example.
Well, for example, maybe some have been in the opening session this morning. We were also colleagues of mine who were there on stage together with 2 of our long-term partners, WWF and the Red Cross. And actually, because we're working for almost 3 decades with those organizations, we know them very well. And last June, in 2021, they jointly published a report on nature-based solutions, which is not something new, but it was new that those 2 giant organizations teamed up together. And it really sparked our imagination, like, okay, we know you. Let's give you some more funds to continue doing what you've now described in this report. So actually it was quite a surprise that we went there in March to hand over a nice amount, an extra amount, to continue what they do. And therefore it was so exciting that since March, it was today, this morning, there was the commitment announced that those programs with the communities, local communities, will run in Mozambique, Kenya, and the Philippines. So I think that's a nice example of we trust you, we know what you're capable of, please continue doing so.
And you gave, Ms. Masiyiwa, you gave us a beautiful example in your first answer. But do you have another example of your work in trust-based philanthropy? And how does someone approach you to ask for your philanthropy if, you know, they don't have a proposal, they don't have the wherewithal to give all the metrics and the numbers? How does that happen?
Okay, so in our philanthropy, we basically target 3 different groups. We have the partners who are sophisticated, have boards, they have strong management teams, they have systems in place already. They know what they are working on, but are looking for long-term funding so that they don't spend time constantly writing proposals and also pivoting to meet the sometimes unreasonable expectations of philanthropists. Sometimes as philanthropists, we are unreasonable in wanting to design programs ourselves when we are actually not on the ground and have very little knowledge. So with that kind of trust-based philanthropy, the due diligence has been done because other people are already funding. So we come in and partner with other funders based on the due diligence that they've already done, and then give them more long-term funding to ensure that, like I said, they're not constantly looking for new sources of funding and having a short-term view of the work that they're doing. And then the second, organizations that are looking for funding for specific projects, where it could be a COVID crisis that we've just had, or a hurricane or cyclone, where funding is needed to specifically meet the needs of communities that have been affected. In that regard, what we try to do is to see who are the partners who are funding these, whether they are the organizations that have given us projects or that have given other third parties. And we partner, so we trust the work that others have already done. You know, it's always so important to look who else has done due diligence so that you don't waste too much time asking the same questions that everybody else has been asking. So we partner and give funding. Then the example I gave is the small organizations, community champions, who have not, do not have the skills or the time to do a lot of paperwork and writing proposals and what have you. What we try to do is to go in and then give that support. So we work together. If they don't have the bookkeeper, the administrator, we then fund some of those skills to ensure that the organization has the right caliber of team members, so that the champion, the community champion, has time to go out into the community and do the things that they're passionate about. So we, like what Judith alluded to, there's a lot of flexible funding. There's also some of the times you're hiring accountants, lawyers, to do some of the additional work that needs to be done, making sure that there are boards in place, making sure that there are systems in place. So there's a lot of flexibility all around in the way we do our trust philanthropy.
Udit, I wrote down this question. It just popped into my head. What is the biggest challenge you face, excuse me, you face in giving away your money? I mean, I can understand the challenges that you're talking about, where, like you just said, folks don't have the structure in place. They don't have the bookkeepers. They don't have the boards in place. But from your vantage point, Udit, do you run into situations where, wow, that is a great program or a great something that we want to fund, but they're just not there. They're not ready.
No, we don't have that problem. There's so much, no. We get like applications, organizations, there's so much great, bold, courageous ideas, innovative ways of thinking. Our problem is that we want to grow and expand and raise more funds. So that's not our problem. And one more note maybe on that unrestrictedness, what we, and a trust-based, I should say, it also sparks innovation and creativity and entrepreneurship with our partners. Because if you have funds available for multi-years, you can think ahead and you can also try things that might be more difficult to have being funded by other donors who are a bit more careful maybe. But I don't see a problem in that. It's of course, we come across organizations that we think you're too small, but we will always redirect or help out. But no, there's so much around that we would love to fund.
So I think I've hit on something with this last question thing, because I'm fascinated. I'm going to ask everybody the same question, so the panelists who are yet to come start thinking. It's Unga. Everybody's here. If you had an opportunity to meet with a world leader, who would it be, and what would you ask them for?
Okay, so we've had the advantage of hearing this question twice. Okay, so
we are prepared.
For me, it is the diaspora. The diaspora are the biggest, most generous philanthropists that I know. Give a big hand shout out to diaspora. I would love, first of all, can I have a show of hands if you are part of the diaspora? They send money. There are no tax incentives. There are no all manner of incentives that make them send money home, but they do so. And a lot of the countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa or low-income countries, depend on remittances to ensure that there's food on the table, kids go to school, medical health services are accessible to communities that would otherwise not have that. If I had an opportunity to meet all of you outside and just shake your hands and give you a hug, I would.
Wonderful. And Udit, who and what?
Maybe, I don't know whether we call her a world leader, but I would like to have a coffee with Mackenzie Scott. Because she did something disruptive a couple of years ago by handing so much unrestricted trust-based funds to a lot of organizations. So I hope she's watching. I really would like to meet you. I think she's an example. And I hope that after a couple of years, because I know it's been researched, what the effect is of so much money, it's billions, that she actually handed out the same amount that we worked for and we raised with our players in 30 years, like 12 points, whatever, billion, which is amazing. So I would love to talk with her and see how we can inspire maybe more foundations and funders to work a little bit similarly.
If I can also add, sure. One of the organizations that I serve on the board have also been beneficiaries of what she has done. She's been audacious. She has set a trend, and she's a woman.
Let's have a coffee together.
And that is a great note to end on. Udit Lingaman, Tsitsi Masiyiwa, thank you both very much for this conversation.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Our next conversation is under the banner, Funding What's Hard. And I'm going to have that conversation one-on-one with Alex Soros, Chair of the Open Society Foundations. Alex. Okay, here comes the hard interview.
All right, let's do it.
All right, Alex, why have you and the Open Society Foundations made a commitment to funding some issues in regions that many funders find very challenging to fund? And what are some examples of these priorities?
I don't think I can tell that story without acknowledging my father's, history. Surviving the Holocaust by thanks to luck, basically, in Hungary, and then immigrating to a democracy imbues very much, who we are and what our values are. And for him, having all of his rights stripped away, being stateless, and knowing that no amount of money was going to get him out of that, I think, was a valuable lesson about the importance, of rights. We back, human rights and democracy, and because of that, a lot of people don't like us.
I can't imagine who you're talking about. Why is it so hard to fund these areas? Defending democracy and protecting human rights. Both of these things are vital. They're essential to safeguarding just basic rights. Why do you stick with funding such challenging areas, and especially when doing so opens up the foundation, but also your family, to such intense criticism?
I think you have to have a very high risk tolerance, and also have to have real convictions in what you believe. But I think that this issue about attacks, which you mentioned, so many people that we support go through them. So if we can't endure them, then what are we? But at the same time, I think that that's also I think that that's also the issue with a lot of funders. I think, people want to do philanthropy to do good, and they don't want to risk their life doing it. And I think that that's, I'm not going to, sit here and say that everybody should, want to do that. But, at the same time, I think that there is, a larger problem in philanthropy, which is that, everybody wants to do their own thing in their own way. I think that there's that deficit definitely among progressives in the political arena, whereas the other side has their way, and it's very top down, and I think in many respects they're much more effective. But having the benefit of being a single donor organization, I think we're allowed to take risks that other foundations can't take, because they are multi-stakeholders, organizations, or have, very conservative boards, or, are very institutionalized, part of what has become institutionalized philanthropy. No offense to it, but we hold ourselves to a higher risk tolerance.
Can you give examples, because we've talked a lot about just the attacks and the risk tolerance.
Yeah.
So talk about the progress that you've made by withstanding all that, taking all that risk.
Look, I think, if you look at what the foundation invested in its beginnings, we made a lot of things that weren't, let's say, sexy at the time. We brought them into the mainstream. Whether that's success or not, I can leave up, to other people. But one of the reasons why we are attacked the way we are is because we were supporting, harm reduction and drug policy all across the world. Which was a huge, and still is, a huge stigma. In other parts of the world, religious groups hated us because we were supporting women's rights and women's right to choose and access various forms of contraception. And obviously, that battle has now come to the United States in a different way. And we also, because of my father's history and because of our mission, have worked, a lot of times with minorities, with vulnerable groups. Partly because we don't see rights as pie, as if like, oh, if you're going to invest in this group, you can't, invest in this group. Actually, if you look, at why we invested, so heavily in the Roma population in Eastern Europe, and just a few weeks ago we announced a $100 million Roma-owned, initiative, the first of its kind. It's because they were vulnerable and vulnerable of being left behind during the transition and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. I think that we've had problems with the exception of the European Commission at times and some willing member states to find other people willing to fund and have solidarity in that area.
You're a single donor foundation, but you're not the only foundation doing all of this work. I mean, who do you work with to help advance? Because these are big issues. You're defending and protecting democracy and defending and protecting human rights. There's two huge things. So do you have basically natural philanthropic allies and alliances who can go in together and do things?
Yeah, I mean, look, we are very. I mean, the world's a big place, and there are many different partners we have. I'm kind of limited in what I can say on that because of the sort of the political work that some entities affiliated with us do, and there we do a lot of partnerships around safe voting, for example. But you had. We went from the, I believe, from the Casey Foundation. Before me, we partnered with them, in Baltimore, where we had a standalone project, particularly dealing with drug addiction when Baltimore was the most drug addicted city in the country. So we do have, partners in organized philanthropy. I'm not sure, and some people I work with are probably going to hate me for saying this. I'm not sure that that's the most cost-effective way, because oftentimes, oftentimes the sort of the mutual fund approach, while you take less risk, you owe people more favors. And if you're willing to take the risk, do it yourself. I mean, I think that's sort of my view, particularly if you can get, because philanthropy, just like politics, just like sports, just like anything, I mean, the effectiveness is about timing. And if you can get what's needed out quicker and to the people that need it in order to, in order to have impact, I think that's the most important thing that you can do.
I want to ask you two questions in the 4 minutes that we have left. The first one is a serious question, and that is the impact of the criticisms and the attacks on the people who work at the foundation. Does that impact the morale of the folks who are doing this big and important work that you're talking about?
I think it does for some. I think it impacts more our grantees, but we do have to have a security presence in front of the foundation, and there are people at the foundation that we have offices across the world. I think a lot of people sign up for that job. They give me a lot of inspiration in that. I mean, particularly, a lot of people, that a lot of people, themselves, were political prisoners or dissidents. So they sometimes, I would say, we've run into problems where their risk tolerance is even more than ours. In the sense of wanting to stay open and still persevere when in Myanmar, for example, when the junta came to power and they were still trying to work when it was time for them to get out. And luckily we got everybody out.
This last question is one you should already know.
But I can't
be prepared for.
Can the person come back from the dead?
I mean, I had not thought of that. Okay, let's go down this road. So who would you like to resurrect and talk to? No, but seriously, if you had an opportunity to meet either someone dead or alive here at,
I was fortunate enough to have, met Nelson Mandela a few times, and I oftentimes wonder if he came back to life now, and the hard, both leaving power and making hard compromises, what he would think of world leaders today and the public today, publics today, in not being able to do that, because it's something I'm still sort of still mesmerized with, having seen it at a very, very young age. But it's the first thing that kind of came to mind. But he's my hero, so it's an easy answer.
All right. But I'm not letting you off the hook. So it's UNGA,
okay,
and the world leaders are here. If there was one person you could meet and you got a chance to meet them, who would it be, and what would you ask them for or talk to them about?
We have a lot of folks that are political prisoners around the world, so there are a lot of dictators. If they're willing to meet with me, I would meet with them to tell them that people are lying to them and that they are paranoid, and these people have done nothing wrong.
Alex Soros, thank you very much. Wait, yeah, leave the mic. See, I like asking that last question because Alex actually went, I was like, wait, what? Someone not alive? This is great. Our final discussion segment is letting partners lead. And we have two terrific people to have this conversation with. Anne-Marie Burgoyne, president of Emerson Collective, and Dr. Raj Punjabi, co-founder and entrepreneur in residence, Last Mile Health and Emerson Collective. Please welcome them both to the stage. Got a lot of movement. I'll let the movement go before we start. Panel migration. This question is for both of you, and Anne-Marie, I would like for you to begin. I would love for each of you to just briefly introduce to us your work in order to set the context for our conversation today. Anne-Marie and then Dr. Raj.
I appreciate that. And I feel like some of the panelists who've gone before have so contextualized some of what I was going to share. For context, though, Emerson Collective is a philanthropic team that sits within an LLC. So we're lucky enough to be surrounded by venture investing partners, a whole really robust technology team, a very, very crackerjack policy team, a team that works a lot with capable artists. I mention that because we're actually a really large network of both well-connected and deeply caring, leaning towards social change folks. And so what it's allowed us to do as a philanthropic team is be a funder of ecosystem opportunities. We seek out strong leaders, we seek out strong, big models, and then we try to lean into those opportunities. We've been on a journey of trust-based philanthropy for about a decade. I'm not sure we always nail it. We really try. We try to lean into people's work. We remind ourselves that we're there to learn and we're here to help. Most of what we do is ask questions, and we remind ourselves that we know very little compared to the people that we work with and we serve. And we really do often ask the question, how can we help you? We're really trying to ask, and it's about the money. It would be foolish to think it's not about the money, but it's about the connectivity, it's about the possibility, and how we can bring that through the collective to people. And the work that they do. I'll also mention, as some of my colleagues who came before, we do almost entirely general operating grants. We do multi-year grants. We do all of our work anonymously in an effort to really shine the light on the people doing the work. So we're trying to come to the work with a level of knowing that we know very little and that we're trying to bring resources of an array of different kinds to the people who are taking on the day-to-day service.
Dr. Ryan?
So I'm have the privilege of serving on the Last Mile Health board now and helped start the organization about 16 years ago. I had grown up in Liberia in West Africa and come here with my family when the Civil War happened there. I had a chance to go back to Liberia to serve the people we'd left behind. And when I got back there in 2005, what I found was just utter destruction after the war. We had not just the physical destruction that you expect, schools being destroyed, running water being completely gone, electricity being gone, but also the devastation in people. We had just 50 doctors left to serve a country of 4 million people. We're in New York City. Imagine this city having about 20 doctors to serve the entire city. That's what it would be like. It might be even worse because those few doctors, Jonathan, were really in cities, not in rural areas. So if you got sick in a rural community or in a city, you might stand a chance. But if you're in a rural community, you could die from conditions really no one should die from, complications of childbirth, malaria, HIV. And so Last Mile Health was founded with some very humble roots of some funding from my public health classmates, some of the most wealthiest people on the planet, public health classmates. But we started by really trying to extend the reach of the medical team, investing in people in the communities themselves, so-called community health workers. These are outreach workers who don't have a medical degree like I have, don't often have a high school degree, but are willing and committed to serve their own people. And we hire them, we train them for a few weeks, we equip them with medicines and test kits. They're coached by nurses, and they go door to door to bring care to their neighbors. So just to give you an example for those who may not be in the health sector, they might help a mother plan her birth at a hospital so that she gives a safe birth. They might help a child get vaccinated. During the COVID emergency phase of the COVID pandemic, they were on rickshaws in India bringing care and vaccines to people, not waiting for people to come to vaccines. They were going door to door in forest communities to provide that kind of support. Some of you were here 2014, 15, 16 during history's worst Ebola outbreak, which affected the country I grew up in. And they went door to door with doctors and nurses to find the sick, get them into care, and help halt the Ebola outbreak, help keep those communities safe in Liberia and West Africa, but also keep all of us safe. And you know, to me, there's one of them named Serena. I was recently, a few years ago, caring for patients with Serena after the Ebola outbreak. And you know, we often talk about mistrust that plagues public health. I've come to believe that these community health workers are part of the antidote against that plague of mistrust. Why? Because Serena, I asked her, why did you step up and put your life on the line during the Ebola outbreak? And she said to me, it was really simple. Doc, I love my community and my community loves me. So that's what's been powerful about this work in investing in communities.
So can we talk about the relationship between the two of you? And I'm sorry the way that came out. Between Emerson...
We have something to announce.
Right.
Oh, no.
Between Emerson Collective and Last Mile Health. I mean, we have a grant maker and a grantee in a partnership. How does that work?
Well, maybe I'll start, and then I'm going to throw it over to Raj. I'll acknowledge I've gotten to know Last Mile Health over many years. Before I was at Emerson Collective, I was at Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, which funds really early-stage organizations, and also has a very trust-based philanthropy model. And so I'd gotten to know Raj. I came over to Emerson Collective, and what I'll say is we're seeking out proximate entrepreneurs. And so when I made that journey over, I had my list in my back pocket of proximate social entrepreneurs. And we had lots of flexibility at Emerson Collective. It is fair to say that we are an ecosystem funder in education, in immigration, in client and environmental justice. There's places where we've done a lot of work. And then we're very, very open to other opportunities that come toward our door, especially leaders that see the path of direct service and community-based work, bringing them toward, over time, opportunities for change that are more policy or culture-based. And we're looking for that. And that's actually an arc that often takes at least a decade. So when I say we're looking for that, we're looking for making commitments for a long time. And so when we started to support Last Mile Health, it was actually in a bigger cohortship too. Partners in Health was in that group. Living Goods was in that group, and I'd been on the board of Living Goods for many years when I'd been at Draper Richards Kaplan. Medic Mobile, which is now called Medic, which does a lot of the underpinnings of community health. So for us, it's not just like a shot in the dark. It's really a constellation, because a constellation is when you have a journey and you build momentum toward change. So we made our first multi-year grants. Over time, we're also part, and we have been for many years, of the audacious community. And I mention that because doing big bets is often, it can't be a lonely enterprise. When you get to the point where you're doing big bets, it's a team sport. And Audacious gave us the vehicle for that. And someone mentioned earlier, and I really appreciated this, often a couple people have to be the diligence folk. Now, in Audacious, you end up having Bridgespan as a diligence folk. But I feel like for us, when that $50 million opportunity was created, we were one of the people that was a storyteller in the room. We were able to say, we were there when this organization was small. And this is the history we've seen. This is the change we've seen. And also, this is the way we've seen leaders grow when they're coached. This is how we've seen these leaders grow when they struggle. So that's just to give a sense of how we try to lean in, and then I'm going to defer to Raj to pick it up from there.
That's right. I think the idea of making big bets and doing it with others is critical. That became an inflection point for Last Mile Health, and I want to say even more broadly, lowercase Last Mile Health, the mission of bringing healthcare within every last one of us, because a number of philanthropists in that room through the Audacious Project with Emerson Collective decided to step up and make this $50 million bet, and then they pushed us further. They said, go out and get another $50 million to match that if you want to unlock it, which was both terrifying and exciting, but we went out and did it. And today, Last Mile Health is working in service of 12 million people with governments across Africa, but importantly, because they focused on the mission. How do you get healthcare within reach? How do you invest in these outreach workers, these community health workers? Last year, Last Mile Health joined forces with many others and launched the Africa Frontline First effort with the Financing Alliance for Health. Skoll Foundation, Johnson & Johnson, the Global Fund came forward. $100 million has been raised towards a 7-year goal by 2030 to have 100 million people served. Again, because of doing what you love, doing it at scale, and doing it with others.
Dr. Punjabi, let me stick with you here because as a grantee partner, I'm just curious, what are the biggest challenges you might typically face when working with donors?
Well, you know, it's interesting you ask that because I've been reflecting on the theme of the Clinton Global Initiative this year, Keep Going. I actually think that's one of the hardest things to do, to stick with it. To stick with an idea, to stick with a mission, because there's so many new challenges. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, but also philanthropists, face the struggle of trying to stick with the mission. But if you do it, the reward can be huge. I mentioned I was the CEO, Alicia McCormick, who I passed the baton to in 2021, became the CEO because I went to join the Biden-Harris administration. I'm now a recovering public servant after serving as President Biden's lead for his pandemic office at the White House National Security Council, and I refer to that in this conversation because if you stick with it, here's what can happen. I was given the task of trying to design pandemic policies, and one of the first things I saw, Jonathan, was that the United States government would invest in, say, malaria. I was leading the President's malaria initiative early on in the administration. Malaria has been eliminated in several countries with tests, with treatments, with bed nets to stop mosquitoes from biting you. Who's been delivering those bed nets and tests and treatments? They've been women like Serena, community health workers who've gone door to door. But guess what? The US policy when I came into office said you can use US dollars to pay for bed nets, for tests, for treatments, the products, but not the people. $1 trillion of women's work on the front lines of healthcare, and 70% of community health workers are women. $1 trillion of women's work in healthcare around the world goes unpaid every single year. I asked, is this law? And they said, well, we think so. Have we asked a lawyer? No. Let's ask counsel. 2 days later, they wrote back and said, this is an administrative decision, meaning in government speak, the leaders can choose to do something different. So we abolished that policy. And every other policy, we launched the pandemic fund with G20 countries. President Biden led that effort at the World Bank. Community health workers, paid community health workers, are a key focus. So when you stick with it, the reason I bring it up in the context of philanthropy is when you're in government and you're trying to change these policies, the most motivating thing I found was to be able to point to people like Anne Marie and Cassia Holstein, who's here in the audience from Emerson Collective, working with entrepreneurs, sticking with the mission, and say, it is possible, there it is, right there in those countries.
Anne Marie, I would love to get your thoughts on what Dr. Raj was talking about. But also, do you ever, I mean, it's great, stick with it. Stick with it. But do you ever get to a point where it's like, I just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel here?
Yes. And I actually think, I started working in philanthropy for Bill Draper almost 20 years ago. And Bill Draper told me, your job will be full of joy, and the hardest part will be when you have to say no. And you know what he didn't tell me, Draper Richards has a fairly prescribed model. So it was always no at the beginning. But when you actually are a long-term philanthropist, you sometimes say no at the beginning, or the middle, or the super painful, not at the end, but still the middle part. And that is the hardest part. I will say I think we try to do that with grace. We try to do it with time. We try to do it with a lot of honesty and a lot of feedback. And because I feel like we try to be good listeners all along the path. And we bring other people into the listening. So one of our practices, we have at any given time 300, 400, 500 grantees, but we have an annual call with every one of them. And we invite people from across Emerson Collective to join those calls. People from our comms team, people from our tech team. And so when I say we're listening as a community. And so when we bring feedback, we try to bring feedback that is actually relevant and useful. When we make connections, we try to have connections that are broad and thoughtful. But in the end, talking to someone about where the vision they see and the vision you see isn't the same is really hard. And I think the one other thing we often bring, we aren't experts. We both know what we don't know and we don't know what we don't know. But I do think we do have the grace of a lot of depth and context. And so can often share, this is what we're seeing here, or we're actually seeing an interesting success here, or when we were out in the world, we heard this. And at least I feel like we leave people not just with a no, but a highly contextualized no, which has an off-ramp both financially, and we offer lots of capacity supports. We often put a long duration on those capacity supports. So if you're going to keep working, we're going to make sure we keep giving you management supports. Or if you need legal supports, we're going to find them for you. So it's not as though we're walking away, but we do tend to have to step away and step forward. And some of that's about money. We have a budget. And some of it's about time. If you do philanthropy in a way that is about listening and being in conversation, at some point there's only so many moments of time that you can lean toward with, and you need to respect that there is that array of opportunities in front of you too.
So on that note, so I have a question to both of you here before I get to the predictable last question. The one piece of advice you would give to the folks in this room to bring them closer to a more effective relationship between grantees and funders?
I'm going to give 3, but they're really fast. One is to listen and ask a lot of questions.
You can take your time.
One is to listen and ask a lot of questions. Another one I'd say, and I was just emailing with someone yesterday, and she said, you know what I appreciate about Emerson Collective? You lean in, and then you lean out. And I thought that was actually very helpful as a vision. And the last thing I'll say is, ask yourself as an institution what all the assets you have are. everybody has money. Everybody who's giving away money has money. That's a kind of defined, known thing. What are the relationships you have? What are the networks you sit in? What is the knowledge you have that if you bring it to this group of people who are deeply focused on social change, it will move their work forward? Those would be the things I would say.
Yeah, I would say mine's, I agree, bring it. That was terrific, and I would say, to add to those points, sort of inspired by my mother, when we came to this country to rebuild our lives, we were at work in their clothing shop, and so I can proudly say my mother still clothes me today. These are suits from her shop, including these shoes, which are pretty nifty if you can't see them. I can see them. But my mother always says, keep your shoes clean before you go out on stage. But I'm going to actually ask you to get your shoes muddy. Anne Marie, Cassia, Lorene Powell Jobs, the leadership of Emerson Collective, came to Liberia several years ago. And they've done this in other places, I'm sure of it, because they were so comfortable getting on hikes in the rainforest, getting on a canoe with a motorbike to get to the other side, walk through the rainforest to go listen to a community health worker who'd been serving her community day in and day out and saving children from malaria and treating others in the community and providing health care. And that presence, to get proximal, is part of investing in people closest to the work. It's part of effective philanthropy. So don't tell my mother I told you, but go get your shoes muddy. That's, I think, important.
And we have, don't worry about the clock, because we actually have two extra minutes, because I'm not letting you off the hook, because everyone got the question.
Stall tactic, by the way.
Cute. It's Unga. World leaders are here. Who would you want to meet with, and what would you either ask them for or want to know from them? Anne-Marie.
I'm going with, and you have to kind of visualize this, it's mayors. It's many mayors, and they're in a row. And it could be like Kate Gallegos from Phoenix. It could be Marvin Rees from Bristol. But they are mayors who care deeply about their communities, and then they care deeply about, I'm going to put the climate migration bucket in the pool, because then you actually get environmental justice and you get the migration of people as well, and their kids and how you honor them with education, and those individuals and how you honor them with jobs. But I feel like mayors are the place where the rubber meets the road. And so I would actually just run down that line and slap all their hands and say thanks. Not entirely answering the question, but handing it to Raj.
You did.
Can it be a fictional character? I'm kidding.
Oh my God. Fine.
The UN's actually, all those world leaders are meeting tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday on universal health care, on how to stop the next pandemic, and how to stop tuberculosis. And I would get in front of all of them, and I would say, if you want to stop those things, invest not just in products, invest in people. Go home and create the policies that abolish the pay gap for women on the front lines of healthcare, that abolish the notion that there can be free work, especially on the backs of people in these communities that are keeping their own people safe and the rest of us safe. So that's what I would ask for.
And if I got that number right, which was startling, $1 trillion
every single year.
Every year.
Women's work goes unpaid.
Anne-Marie Burgoyne, Dr. Raj Punjabi, thank you both very much for this conversation. We're actually ending on time. I'm supposed to give closing remarks, and all I will say is it has been an honor to guide all of these conversations, to talk to all of these brilliant, wonderful people. And I just want to bring up two comments that were said in the second conversation under strategic big bets, where we got two really good lines. One from Mr. Elumelu, who talked about his role to democratize luck, and Dr. Carmen Rojas, who added in her work is to democratize power. And those are two great charges. So thank you all very much for being here. Enjoy the rest of the conference.